the Education Secretary is saying don't use rail strikes to revert to home learning. There's not that many kids go to school on a train, is there?
Well, I mean, that's certainly a question that lots of people are asking on social media. You know, the news of the strikes criticism of the strike has turned into framing around why would you do this to children? And I think this very kind of, I would say, crass way. And Zahawi is responding to, I mean, he's already made comments saying that this is basically that it's selfish for rail workers to do this at a time when lots of young people have exams. And he's doubled down on that now with the news that some schools are planning to close within that week between the 21st to the 20th and the 24th. Because they say that they know that teachers aren't going to be able to get in, and they're telling young people to go back to remote learning just for that period, which is, you know, it's just unacceptable to say that it's going to become the norm that at any time there's a hiccup or a difficulty in society that schools will shut. I mean, this is part of the pandemic hangover in that it's normalised the idea that school would be closed. I mean, when I was at school, it was, you know, even if there was blizzards, it would be, you know, the last resort would be to close school. And we've lost that kind of sentiment of the importance of education. It's also the case that, you know, Nikki Aiken, the Conservative MP, has come out and said that striking during the exam period is unforgivable. And there's this real kind of, you know, really cheap attempt to try and suggest that the consequence of children's, you know, what we've seen in the last 2 years of kids' education being sacrificed by the closure of schools is now all the blame is going to be on RMT workers, who are these sort of, you know, the devil incarnate people who are sacrificing kids' well-being. That's completely passing the buck for a Tory MP to talk like that.
It does seem a bit odd. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm no fan of strikes because, from a very personal perspective, it causes chaos for individuals. Not to say they don't have a point that needs to be made. But no, you can't suddenly start blaming them for everything.
Well, I mean, the RMT and indeed other unions that are engaging in strikes across different sort of industries have pointed out that there is this really stupid idea about how strikes work. Strikes are meant to be disruptive.
Yes,
they're meant to be, you pick them, you know, it's funny that no one's going on about Glastonbury because I suppose that would reveal people's class prejudices if they moaned about it being at the time of Glastonbury. But, you know, you've got Glastonbury, you've got sporting events, you've got exam periods. That week is, if you were going to have a strike, it's the time to do it, to really show bosses what you mean. And so, you know, it comes down to a question of whether or not you support strike action. I do. And
do you support this particular strike for this particular reason?
I do, because I think that, you know, the RMT have a long history of being very forthright in arguing for better pay and better working conditions at times.
But their average wage is well above the national average, isn't it?
I know, but, you know, you can argue that it's all relative, but we've been talking about the fact that there's a cost of living crisis, and their argument is that wages are not meeting with, you know, inflation rises and other things, and that there's been ongoing battles. And, you know, I think that other workers across other industries should take a leaf out of their book, because we're constantly, you know, commentators like us are constantly going on television and saying, well, what can you do about gas prices? What can you do about food prices? What can you do about this? The world's going to hell in a handcart. And this is the one thing that workers can do very effectively to make sure that their wages manage to let them survive on a very basic level.